Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Sheffer.
Well, for almost 4 years now, you've heard lots of stories from us, and the vast majority of them want to talk about treasure of some sort. It's usually gold or silver, one kind of treasure or another. The Jesuits left it here, or Jacob Waltz left it here. Today we're going to talk about a different kind of treasure. And these treasures could have been found at like Hackberry Springs, Brad's Water, there's Whiskey Springs, Dripping Springs, Thule Springs, and even Fraser Springs down there by the ranch we talked about with the JF Ranch. Well, these particular places all had one thing in common, and that was that back just before Arizona became a state, they were hiding places for moonshine stills. Didn't think I was going there, did you? Well, that's what they were good hiding places for. And it's really kind of funny when you think about it, because Arizona's gotten a bad rap. For some reason or another, people look at Arizona because we have such nice weather all the time. It's nice to be outside. And they seem to think that we're always celebrating with a beer in their hand all the time, and that Arizona is nothing but a bunch of beer drinkers. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, that just isn't so. Arizona only ranks 25th in the continental United States of people who drink beer. In fact, they're not even a strong 25. There's a lot more states that drink a lot more beer than we do. But the thing that has happened with Arizona, well, once the word about the discovery of rich gold veins and the silver deposits came about, people started coming out to Arizona big time. And what that was doing was it was causing small tent cities to pop up. And then there were towns that popped up, and then cities that popped up. And it only took a few centuries from when that insurgence started with the Europeans until Arizona became a state where people were coming out here from the east, manifesting their destiny, as it used to say. The common denominator for all of these towns was that they all had saloons. Well, they had every tradesman in the world that was coming out here to maintain the towns, but they all had saloons, they had bawdy houses, and they had gambling establishments. There were generally more of these businesses than there were anything else. Now, I can tell you that the card games were tough. I can also tell you that the booze they were drinking was even tougher. And I'm not even going to go into what the entertainment was about. But make no mistake, there were plenty of these places to help these prospectors and miners and all these people who were making money. There were lots of places to help them spend it, and spend it they did. Well, through all of this, the good news is that more people survived than didn't. And there were towns like Phoenix and Tombstone and Tucson that were really getting some growth under their wings, and they were turning into real civilized places. There were hospitals and schools, large conglomerate businesses, and of course there were saloons. But the problem with the saloons now was that they were kind of highfalutin. They were dinner places, and you could go in and get fine wine and good whiskey. The problem with that, as I mentioned, was that the normal guy on the street couldn't afford that. But he still wanted to drink just the same as he ever did. So he had to find a way to get around that. Progress notwithstanding, Arizona in the long run really was a late bloomer. It didn't even become a state until 1912. It was the Valentine State, February 14th, 1912. But they did have one other significant problem, other than being the late bloomer, and that was Arizona didn't have any breweries of its own. Now that is a problem. Not everybody, as I mentioned, was willing to go and spend the money at the big, expensive places. So consequently, there was a shortage of beer for these people. Well, American ingenuity comes to the rescue again. The American men and women have always been able to find solutions, and they have found these solutions to fill holes that needed to be filled. They found they found ways to scratch itches that people had, and we've always come out ahead. That's the American way. Now, of course, if we look back at Tennessee and the Carolinas and like that, the people back there knew how to fill that hole, the one needing whiskey, I mean, because they had stills back there for years and years and years. The good news is that a lot of those tradespeople, the moonshiners, they're tradespeople, you know, they were coming out here just the same as everybody else. Now, through my research, I learned that moonshiners worked stills throughout the Superstition Mountains. One of those particular stills was up at a location called Whiskey Springs. Unfortunately, I'm not real sure which one of those Whiskey Springs it was, because there are several, as we know now. The same as with Hackberry Springs, there were several of those. But be that as it may, the one that was at Whiskey Springs was a 100-gallon still. Now that still, when it finally was shut down, it was built out of timber and copper and galvanized metal, and it was producing all this wonderful whiskey. When it was shut down, that still was picked up by old man Haneker, and it can be viewed now. It's on display up at the Bluebird Mine and Curiosity Shop. If you want to go up there and see it, you can see a real live still that came out of there. Now, all this ground, I have to tell you, where these stills were located is rough stuff. This is rough territory to be in. They had to be in a place where there was water available, but they had to be hidden. And quite frankly, I could never understand why they had to be so deep in the mountain to hide, because it doesn't take you much to hide in the Superstitions. At that time, especially, because you could come out here, it's not like we were jam-packed with people. You could go up in the mountains a half a mile and disappear forever if you wanted to. Well, now, one of the reasons was caused by the 18th Amendment, which was passed on January 16th of 1919. The Volstead Act itself wasn't passed until the following year, in 1920. Now, it's really kind of important to explain something here. The government did it to itself with this one. The 18th Amendment says that you could not make, could not ship, you couldn't sell anything with whiskey. The one singular thing it didn't say you couldn't do was drink it. So they went back and they created the Volstead Act, which says, okay, you can have all the whiskey you want, but you can't drink it. Well, they had to fix all that, and so the Volstead Act was put into play. And now you had the federal government was out looking for anybody either drinking, selling, buying, or making booze. Well, now, that's kind of crazy. That happened in 1919 and 1920. But believe it or not, Arizona, being the state as it was and supposed to have been the one where everybody drinks all the time, passed its own Prohibition Act January 1st of 1915, 5 years before the Volstead Act was put into effect. And that was one of those, whoa, I got to read this again. Because as we know, when Arizona became a territory, the old-timers would tell you in a heartbeat that this was probably one of the wettest places in the entire world. They built their first brewery back then. And as far as everybody was concerned, as an arid state goes, Arizona was pretty wet. Arizona's prohibition law was not seriously enforced until the 1920s, the Volstead Act. And that's when the federal agents started going after everybody. And that answered my question about the stills. That's why they went back in there and hid so well. Because these federal guys, they went out of their way to be pains in the butt, and they would go after them. So they went to where nobody else would want to go. Now, part of what happened with this in becoming a prohibition state so early was that the Arizona people believed that it would cut down on violence, it would protect the young people by all means, and reduce domestic violence. Unfortunately, not one single one of those things was accomplished. Many people were not so willing to give up their freedom to drink, though. The law was so widely violated, the sheriff in one county alone reported that he had seized, you're going to love this, 152 stills, arrested 183 people for federal alcohol violations, and he had arrested 80 additional state violations. This was all within a 3-month period. So the feds were really serious about what they were doing with the moonshine out here. Unfortunately, guilty moonshiners weren't the only people getting hurt. A lot of innocent people were hurt badly as well. The beverages themselves were toxic, mostly from lead components from the distillation. Some added creosote for color. Some even had embalming fluid or gunpowder to get that extra little kick that everybody liked in their whiskey. On top of that, the moonshiners and bootleggers typically had to bribe the law enforcement so that they could actually operate at all. So there was a tremendous breakdown from that legal side, not to mention the morality side. So there was a tremendous disrespect for the law all around. It also became quite fashionable for women to flaunt the law. What was happening was that people want to drink. That just goes without saying, and they're going to do it, whatever they have to do. Unfortunately, when people decide to do that, they go to the other side of the scale. And so people were just going crazy in the speakeasy, and they would just go in and drink themselves into oblivion. It wasn't a matter of going to have fun anymore, per se. It was just go and drink and get stupid, which apparently is what they did. Well, come time for the prohibition to go away, the Arizona people were right on top of making it go away because they voted with 75% of the people in the state to get rid of prohibition. So it finally went away with everybody else. We learned a couple lessons here. We learned that realistically you can't make people stop drinking. We also learned, which the Fed never has seemed to learn, that you cannot legislate morality. No matter what you try to do, you can govern a lot of things, but you can't govern morality. In closing, I'd like to tell you a story about a legend of a large moonshine operation that took place up in the Supes. And it was never overturned by the revenuers. They never found it, never got to it. And it was said that this particular still produced the finest in the thunder god's white lightning. Gotta love it. Gotta be good stuff. Some claimed that it was the smoothest whiskey that had ever come out of the mountains. And it was really kind of interesting that when you talk about being in a tough place, this particular still was located in the upper regions of Rough Canyon. And it is a very well-named canyon. It is Rough Canyon, and it is a lousy piece of real estate if you ever want to try and go and see it. but I wouldn't recommend going up there. You can't get any horses there, so you're going to be walking on hands and knees after a fashion. So I have to say, if you want to do that, you go do that, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. I can't speak to the moonshine back then, but I can say I've had a taste or two of it in my time, of the real white lightning. And I'll tell you right now, the stuff can put hair on an egg if you're not careful. The moonshiners of the Superstitions produced their own kind of treasure that was another intriguing part of Arizona history. And it was a treasure for a while back then. Not much more you can say about that. They made whiskey and they fulfilled a niche that had to be filled. That all said, I think I'll just kick back on my porch and gaze out at the mountain and contemplate just how wonderful it is to be able to say, it doesn't get any better than this on a gorgeous Arizona day. I'm content with that. And if you listen really closely, you might even hear the unmistakable sound of a thumper out there purring away, making whiskey. That's out there in the home of the Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains. Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.